"Old man, what was your MOS, cook or laundry?" The joke came out easy under the Route 58 overpass. Easy enough that 3 young Marines laughed before they thought about the man sitting against the concrete pillar with a canvas bag at his hip and rainwater darkening the cuffs of his old field jacket. Naval Air Station Oceana sat beyond the fence line in the late October light. All chain link, warning signs, hangar doors, and the distant thunder of jets rolling across the gray Virginia sky. 5 Marines had just come off shift from Hangar 3, paper coffee cups in hand, flight line grease on their sleeves, moving with the loose confidence of men who belonged somewhere important. Logan Pierce was the loudest of them, 26, white, sharp-eyed, an aviation mechanic with clean boots, fast hands, and the kind of grin that always checked the group to see if it had landed. He had not meant to sound cruel in his own mind. That was the worst part. To Logan, the old man was just another figure under the overpass, another weathered face the base traffic passed each morning without slowing, another piece of the background between the gas station and the side gate. But Martin Hale heard him. 77 years old, white-bearded, shoulders narrow beneath a faded olive jacket, brown boots cracked at the toes, but laced with military neatness. Martin opened one eye and looked at the young Marine. Not with anger, not even with surprise. He looked at him the way a man looks at a door he thought had been sealed for good. The canvas bag beside him held close against his leg, its strap repaired with gray thread, the brass buckle polished by years of touch. Staff Sergeant Graham Ellis, older than Logan and quieter than the others, stopped half a step behind the group. Something about the stillness of the old man made him lower his coffee. The laughter faded into the engine noise from the base. Logan, feeling the attention and wanting his joke back, tilted his head. "What is wrong, sir? Forgot your job coat." One Marine smirked, then looked away. Martin's gaze moved from Logan to Graham, and for 3 seconds the whole underpass seemed to hold its breath with the traffic passing overhead. Then Martin closed his eye again as if deciding the world had already taken enough from him to be owed no explanation. But Graham did not move. He was staring now, not at the old man's clothes, not at the cracked boots, but at the way Martin's right hand rested flat on his knee, perfectly still. Martin spoke so softly the Marines almost missed it. "Reaper storm." The words did not echo. They sank. Graham's coffee cup slipped from his hand and hit the concrete, and the joke died before the last drop spread. Martin Hale had lived near the Route 58 underpass long enough for most people to stop seeing him. To morning commuters, he was the old man with the canvas bag. To gate traffic, he was the shape beneath the concrete when rain came sideways off the road. To the gas station clerk 2 blocks west, he was the quiet veteran who bought the cheapest black coffee before sunrise, counted exact change on the counter, and always said, "Thank you, ma'am." Like good manners were one of the few possessions no one had managed to take from him. He woke every morning before 0500, not because he owned a clock that worked, but because his body still believed engines started early and a man should be ready before the first sound reached him. He folded his blanket into thirds, tucked the frayed edge inward, and set it behind the pillar where the wind would not drag it into the drainage ditch. His boots were old, the leather split near the toes, but the laces were crossed in a pattern too deliberate to be accidental. Every few days he wiped them with a damp rag, not to make them shine, but to keep them from surrendering completely. His field jacket had one sleeve patched with darker fabric, and the collar carried a faint line of salt from years of weather. In the left pocket, he kept a small brass compass with a cracked lens. It no longer pointed true, but he carried it anyway, because a man can outlive the usefulness of a thing and still owe it loyalty. In the canvas bag were objects he never spread out where strangers could see them. A folded Virginia road map from 1986, a plastic sleeve holding a faded photograph of 5 young men beside a hangar door, a radio earpiece wrapped in cloth, and a piece of paper softened by years of being opened in private. Names were written there in block letters, some darker than others where the ink had been retraced by an unsteady hand. Martin did not beg. He did not tell stories for money. He did not correct people who assumed he had simply drifted into ruin through weakness. Some losses were too complicated for sidewalks. Some men came home carrying rooms no one else could enter. What kept him near the base was not nostalgia exactly. It was the sound. The jets followed patterns. The maintenance trucks arrived at predictable intervals. The fence lights clicked on at the same time each evening. Order survived here, even if he no longer lived inside it. So when Logan Pierce laughed and asked his careless question, Martin did not feel anger first. He felt the old tiredness of being reduced to what could be seen from a distance. But when Staff Sergeant Graham Ellis dropped his coffee after hearing those two words, Martin knew the past had finally found someone who had been looking for it without knowing. Logan Pierce was not cruel in the way men are cruel when they plan to wound someone. He was cruel in the easier way, the common way, the way a young man becomes when he learns that a laugh can make him feel taller in a group. At 26, he was good at his job and proud of it. He could diagnose a stubborn system's fault by sound, change a stubborn component faster than most mechanics on the line, and keep a hangar crew loose during the long hours when fatigue made every task feel twice as heavy. The other Marines liked him because he was quick with a joke, quick with a wrench, and quick to make hard work feel less grim. That talent had protected him since childhood in a small North Carolina town where his father worked nights. Money ran short, and silence at the dinner table usually meant bills were waiting in another room. Logan learned early that if he could make people laugh, they would not look too closely at what he lacked. In the hangar, that habit became status. A sharp comment after a rough shift. A nickname that stuck. A joke thrown toward the edge of discomfort, then pulled back before anyone important objected. Most days, no one got hurt enough for him to notice. That was why the old man under the overpass had seemed safe to use. Martin Hale had no rank visible, no badge, no clean uniform, no place in the chain that Logan understood. He was outside the fence line, outside the hangar, outside the world where Logan's skill mattered. To Logan, that distance made the joke harmless. But when Staff Sergeant Graham Ellis dropped his coffee, the sound cracked through Logan's confidence. Graham was not easy to shake. He was 38, steady, respected, the kind of Marine who listened more than he spoke and made younger men feel immature just by standing still. Now Graham stared at Martin as if the old man had reached into a locked room of his family history and turned on a light. Logan glanced at the others, searching for the laughter to return, but it did not. The traffic overhead kept rolling. A jet lifted somewhere beyond the fence, its engine note rising through the damp October air. Martin remained seated with one eye closed, as if the two words he had spoken had cost him more than the whole group understood. Logan felt irritation rush in to cover his unease. "Come on," he said, forcing the grin back onto his face. "You heard that phrase from somebody around here, right?" Nobody answered. Graham bent slowly, picked up the fallen cup, and kept looking at Martin. Logan's grin thinned. For the first time, he realized the joke had not made him look powerful. It had made him look small. Martin Hale could have let the moment pass. He had done that most of his life since leaving the world of uniforms behind, letting strangers misread him because correcting them required opening doors he had spent years learning how to keep shut. He could have leaned back against the concrete pillar, closed both eyes, and allowed Logan Pierce to bury the discomfort under another joke. It would have been easier. Easier to be the old man under the overpass. Easier to be invisible again before the traffic light changed and the Marines walked back through the side gate to a place that still had order, coffee, tools, lockers, and names on doors. But Staff Sergeant Graham Ellis had not moved. His face had gone pale in a way Martin recognized, not from fear, but from a son suddenly hearing something his father had carried in silence. Martin looked at Graham's jawline, the set of his shoulders, the way his left hand curled slightly when he was trying to stay composed. It was not memory exactly. It was recognition arriving through blood. Martin shifted his weight and placed one palm against the pillar to stand. His knees protested, but he rose without asking for help. The canvas bag strap slid into his hand, familiar and worn smooth where his fingers had held it for years. Logan took half a step back. Not much, just enough to reveal that he still did not know whether the old man was a problem or a person. "Sir, you do not have to get up," Graham said, but his voice was no longer the voice of a Marine managing a street encounter. It was the voice of a man afraid the answer might disappear if he blinked. Martin looked at him for a long second. "Your father," he said quietly. "Was his name Ellis too?" Graham's throat moved. "Daniel Ellis." The name changed the air beneath the overpass. Even Logan stopped pretending to smile. Martin lowered his eyes to the canvas bag. He knew the risk of what came next. People liked clean stories. They liked proof inside folders, plaques on walls, records with stamps. They did not know what to do with memory carried by a man whose coat smelled of rain and concrete dust. If Martin spoke, they might call him confused. If he reached into the bag, they might tell him not to touch anything. If he followed them toward the hangar, security might turn him away before the truth reached the person it belonged to. But Daniel Ellis had once shared coffee from a dented thermos and joked that his boy would grow up stubborn enough to argue with weather. A son was standing here now, waiting. Martin opened the side pocket of the bag and took out a folded Virginia map, its creases soft as cloth. He did not hand it over. He only unfolded one corner and pointed to a small pencil mark beside the old perimeter road. He carried a silver lighter with a cracked hinge, Martin said. Said it was bad luck to fix it. Graham's eyes filled before he could hide it. Logan looked from Graham to Martin, and the overpass no longer felt like a place people passed through. It felt like a doorway. Martin folded the map again, slow and careful, then lifted the canvas bag onto his shoulder. If you want the rest, he said, we should not do it under traffic. The walk from the overpass to the side gate was less than a quarter mile, but for Martin Hale it felt longer than the years he had spent pretending the hangar sounds did not still live inside him. Graham Ellis walked beside him without touching his arm, close enough to help if asked, far enough to let the old man keep the last piece of dignity people usually try to take in the name of kindness. Logan Pierce followed half a step behind, quieter now, but not yet changed. At the gate, the first real test came from a young security Marine who looked at Martin's patched field jacket, cracked boots, and canvas bag before he looked at his face. Staff Sergeant, he cannot just come in, the guard said. The words were correct by procedure and still sharp enough to make everyone hear what was underneath. Martin stood still. He did not argue. He had been turned away from warmer places for smaller reasons. Logan glanced at Graham, then at the gate, trapped between regulation and the embarrassment of having helped create this moment. He is with us, Graham said. The guard hesitated. I still need to check the bag. Martin's fingers tightened once around the strap, just once, the only sign that the request had touched something private. The canvas bag was not valuable to anyone else, but it held the last geography of his life. The map, the compass, the old photograph, the names, the small things that proved he had not invented the people he remembered. For a second, the unfairness of it sat in the damp air. The man who had once known a secret phrase that froze a Marine in place was now being asked to open his only belongings on a concrete checkpoint table, while younger men decided whether his memories looked suspicious. Martin placed the bag down gently. He opened it himself, not quickly, not defensively, folding back the flap with the same care he used every morning with his blanket. The guard saw the cracked compass, the plastic-sleeved photograph, the folded map, a clean pair of socks, a worn paperback, and a piece of paper with names written in block letters. Nothing dangerous, nothing impressive, everything sacred. Logan looked away first. That small act revealed more shame than any apology could have. Inside Hangar 3, the noise and light swallowed them. Hydraulic carts hummed. Fluorescent fixtures reflected off the polished epoxy floor. Mechanics paused as the homeless old man entered between uniformed Marines. Someone near a workbench muttered, "Who brought him in here?" Martin heard it. Of course he did. He kept walking anyway, eyes moving over the aircraft, the tool racks, the yellow safety lines, the old rhythm beneath all the new equipment. Then he stopped beside a maintenance bay, tilted his head toward a slow mechanical pulse, and said, calm as weather, "That left actuator is cycling late." A mechanic froze with a wrench in his hand. Graham turned. Logan's face went pale, because the man they had nearly left outside had just read the hangar better than most men who worked inside it. For a few seconds after Martin spoke, Hangar 3 seemed to forget its own noise. The power carts still hummed, the overhead lights still burned white against the polished floor, and somewhere beyond the open bay doors a jet engine rolled low across the damp Virginia afternoon. But the people nearest Martin had gone still. The mechanic with the wrench looked toward the actuator, then toward his supervisor, suddenly unsure whether he had missed something obvious or witnessed something impossible. Martin did not repeat himself. He stood under the industrial lights with his patched field jacket hanging loose from narrow shoulders, canvas bag at his feet, rain still dark on the bottoms of his trousers. The hangar smelled of hydraulic fluid, old coffee, warm metal, and floor cleaner, and the mixture pulled him backward so sharply that he had to place one hand on the edge of a tool cart. Logan saw it and almost stepped forward, then stopped, afraid of making another assumption. Graham saw it too, and his face changed from hunger for answers to concern for the man carrying them. Martin closed his eyes for one breath. In the dark behind them was not glory, not adventure, not the kind of story young men turn into jokes when they have never had to live inside one. It was a room of sounds, rotor wash over concrete, a radio voice fading in and out, a lighter snapping open with a broken hinge, Daniel Ellis laughing once and telling him that coffee should be strong enough to keep a man honest. Martin opened his eyes again, but the loneliness stayed visible for a moment before he tucked it away. This was why he had stayed under the overpass. Out there, the jets were distant enough to make sense. In here, every light had a memory beneath it. Captain Rebecca Shaw crossed the hangar from the operations office, drawn by the sudden silence more than by any words. She saw the old man first, then Graham standing as if the floor had shifted, then Logan with the expression of someone discovering shame in real time. Martin reached into his canvas bag and removed the folded Virginia map. His fingers were careful, almost gentle, as he spread it across the edge of the maintenance table. The paper was soft from years of use, creased at the corners, marked in pencil so faintly it looked like weather. "I need a pencil," he said. No one moved until Logan did. He pulled one from his sleeve pocket and placed it on the table, not in Martin's hand, but within reach, as if he had finally learned that respect sometimes means not grabbing the moment. Martin nodded once. Then he marked 3 points on the old hangar layout and rested his finger on the center one. "This is where Daniel stood the night everything changed," he said, and the hangar went colder than the rain outside. For a moment, no one asked Martin Hale what he meant. The words sat on the maintenance table with the old Virginia map, heavier than the pencil marks beneath his finger. Captain Shaw moved closer, her face controlled but alert, and Graham Ellis stood across from Martin with both hands resting on the table edge, as if he needed the steel to keep him steady. Logan Pierce stayed a step back. He had made the joke that opened this door, and now he seemed afraid to breathe near it. Martin tapped the center mark once. "Your father was here," he said to Graham. Not because he was assigned there, because he heard the relay stutter before anyone else did. Graham's eyes narrowed, not in doubt, but in the effort to hold himself together. Martin reached into his canvas bag and took out the plastic-sleeved photograph. 5 young men stood beside a hangar door decades earlier, their hair short, sleeves rolled, faces bright with the careless confidence of men who thought time owed them more than it ever does. Martin pointed to the second man from the left, Daniel Ellis. Graham's mouth parted. He had seen pictures of his father older, heavier, quieter. Not like this. Not young enough to look almost like him. Martin continued, and every detail from the afternoon began locking into place. The cracked silver lighter, the old perimeter road, the way Graham stood on his left foot, the phrase that had broken the laughter under the overpass. Reaper Storm was not a nickname, Martin said. It was what we called the recovery chain when official channels moved too slow. No patches, no ceremony, just men who knew which door to open, which radio to trust, which vehicle could still make the road. Captain Shaw looked toward the map, then toward the old maintenance board mounted on the far wall, where faded floor plans of earlier hangar layouts hung behind scratched plexiglass. Her expression changed. The 3 points Martin had marked matched an old access route no longer used, a route younger mechanics walked past every day without knowing why it had once mattered. Graham reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small silver lighter. The hinge was visibly cracked. "My mother kept this," he said, voice thin. "She said he never fixed it." Martin looked at it, and, for the first time, his face softened so deeply that the whole hangar seemed to understand they were no longer listening to a story. They were standing inside a memory that had waited decades for the right son. Logan lowered his eyes. The old man he had mocked had not been trying to sound important. He had been carrying names, routes, habits, and one unfinished truth because no one else had been left to carry them. Martin unfolded the softened paper from his bag. The third line read Daniel Ellis. Beside it, in faded pencil, were 2 words, "kept moving." Graham covered his mouth with one hand, and the hangar went silent in a way no order could have commanded. Martin did not comfort him with easy words. He only slid the paper across the table, slow and careful, giving his son the proof that his father had not vanished into rumor. Logan finally understood. The man under the overpass had not needed their respect to become real. He had been real the whole time. They were the ones arriving late. Logan Pierce did not say he was sorry first. The words were there, sitting behind his teeth, but for once he understood that words could be too easy when a man had already been reduced by them. The hangar remained quiet around the maintenance table, every mechanic and marine aware that something sacred had just been placed in the open. Graham Ellis stood with the softened paper in both hands, reading his father's name as if the letters might fade if he blinked. Captain Shaw looked toward Logan, not to punish him, but to see what kind of man the moment would make of him. Logan swallowed, then turned away from the circle and walked to the break area near the tool lockers. No one stopped him. He returned with a clean chair from the ready room, wiped the seat with a folded shop towel, and placed it beside the main maintenance table, not in a corner, not near the exit, but where the crew chief usually sat during briefings. "Mr. Hale," Logan said, his voice stripped of the grin that had carried him all afternoon. "Would you sit here?" Martin looked at the chair for a long second. A smaller man might have made Logan suffer for the offer. A harder man might have refused it to protect the shape of his pain. Martin did neither. He understood that the young Marine was trying to move respect from his mouth into his hands. So he sat carefully, setting the canvas bag by his boot where he could still feel it against his ankle. Logan went back again and brought a fresh cup of black coffee. No cream, no sugar, because he had heard Martin order it that way at the gas station once and had not known he remembered. He placed it on the table within reach, then stepped back instead of hovering over him. "Before anyone records anything," Logan said, looking at Captain Shaw and then at Graham, "we ask him what he wants shared." That sentence changed the room more than an apology would have. It gave Martin authority over his own story. Graham nodded, eyes still wet. Captain Shaw closed the notebook she had opened too quickly and waited. Martin wrapped both hands around the coffee cup, letting the warmth settle into his fingers. "Jokes are easy," he said, not unkindly, "when a man is far enough away from you." Logan lowered his eyes. Martin took one slow breath and finished. "Harder when you learn his name." No one rescued Logan from the shame of that truth, and Martin did not use it to crush him. That was the mercy in it. Logan reached to his sleeve, removed a clean squadron patch he had been proud to receive that month, and placed it gently on the table beside Martin's old nameless patch. "Then I would like to learn yours properly," he said. Martin looked at the two patches lying side by side, old cloth and new thread under the same fluorescent light, and gave a single nod. By the following Friday, the bench outside Hangar 3 had been moved 6 feet closer to the side door. No one made an announcement about it. No one cut a ribbon or called it a ceremony. It was just there in the late afternoon light, bolted to a clean square of concrete beneath the overhang where the rain could not reach, with a small brass plate fixed to the back rail that read, "For those who came home carrying names." Martin Hale saw it before anyone explained. He stood at the edge of the service road with his canvas bag against his leg, the same patched field jacket buttoned to the throat, the same cracked boots planted carefully on the damp pavement. The October sky had cleared after morning rain, and the low sun turned the hangar doors gold along their edges. Inside, tools moved, engines hummed, and voices called out in the steady rhythm of work, but the sound no longer felt like a door shut against him. Logan Pierce came out first, carrying 2 coffees from the break room. He did not wave them like a joke. He did not call across the lot. He walked over, stopped at a respectful distance, and offered 1 cup with both hands. "Black, Mr. Hale," he said. Martin accepted it with a nod. Behind Logan, Graham Ellis stepped into the doorway holding the silver lighter with the cracked hinge. He did not need to say anything. Some gratitude is too private to survive being spoken too often. Captain Shaw had placed a copy of Martin's map and the recovered names into the hangar archive, not as legend, not as rumor, but as witness record. The old nameless patch had been mounted beside the new squadron patch Logan left on the table, 2 pieces of cloth under glass, separated by decades and joined by one afternoon when a young Marine learned to see. Martin sat on the bench slowly, setting the canvas bag at his feet where his hand could rest on it if memory grew too heavy. Logan sat at the far end, leaving space between them that felt like respect, not distance. Graham remained standing in the doorway, looking out toward the service road his father had once crossed, his face quieter than it had been in years. A junior mechanic passed by carrying a toolbox, glanced toward the bench, and said, "Afternoon, Mr. Hale." Martin looked up. The words were simple, a name, spoken without pity. That was all. Yet the hangar seemed to soften around it. Martin wrapped both hands around the warm cup and listened as a jet rolled somewhere beyond the runway, the sound rising into the clear Virginia sky. This time, no one laughed when the old phrase was mentioned inside Hangar 3. No one made the homeless man part of the background again. And when the sun dropped lower, Martin sat in the gold light outside the door, not rescued, not displayed, just seen.